This is The Speaking Show. I'm David Newman, and you're tuned in to the #1 podcast for speakers, consultants, and experts who want to speak more profitably. Are you brand driven? Well, you better be, because our guest is Mr. Nick Westergaard of Brand Driven Digital. Welcome to The Speaking Show, my friend.
Thank you, David. I am happy to be here.
Now, Westergaard, what is that? Italian, French? What kind of name is that?
You know, I should start keeping a list of all of the different countries of origin. It is Danish. My grandfather came over on the boat, so it literally means West Farm.
Ooh.
I am, however, not a farmer in the West. I'm a speaker, consultant, and author in the Midwest.
So we start right away with false advertising.
Exactly. I know.
Okay. All right. Well, so you have all kinds of cool things going on. We're going to talk about the books. We're going to talk about the podcast. We're going to talk about your brand-driven digital empire that is really cool. Before we get to all of that, though, tell us the Nick Westergaard story. How did you come to do what you do, and how in the world did you land in the filthy environs of this digital marketing thing of all careers?
Oh, I know. Well, it is interesting because a weird offshoot that I normally wouldn't set the stage with, but I will because we'll talk about the speaking side of things, is I studied theater arts and psychology as two very separate interests that we'll come back to. But initially I thought, boy, I care about, thinking about how people think, how people make decisions, but also a little bit of creativity. So that led me into, and I had a young family. So I found the world of marketing as sort of a creative way to be in the world of business. And at that same time, we were, unbeknownst to me, at this inflection point where things digital were really changing everything. So I started out working at a publishing company, and it was a very traditional direct mail, direct marketing enterprise. So I got that as kind of what I think of as my marketing education, learning all about A/B testing, learning about some of these principles that are still very much alive and well. But with new media, I guess I looked like the type of person, being at that time one of the younger people on the team, who they thought, hey, go figure out that digital thing. So I made our first e-commerce website and took what was our direct mail, direct marketing, and transformed that into email marketing. And after about a decade on the corporate side of things, hung a shingle out as a digital marketing consultant, built what I believe I just heard referred to as the brand-driven digital empire. So we'll go with that. And because digital is still very much the kind of sharp end of the spear, and in promoting our consulting business, speaking kind of intersected at that point with what it was that I was doing and really grew to become another stream of that business as well. And as a result of that, you end up writing books and teaching at university, which I do here at the University of Iowa. And all of it, which is why I tossed in that little prologue of theater arts, because what really feeds me is what probably feeds a lot of us, which is being up on stage, but not just being on stage, because I really don't yearn to memorize a part anymore, because what I think is amazing about what we get to do is that you get to be on stage and all of that fun stuff that feeds the performing arts side of things, but you get to be on stage helping people. You're in front of a crowd of folks, even if it's a small workshop or a big keynote, but those people are going to come out of there, hopefully, if we've done our jobs right, knowing how to do something differently.
Now, let's talk about where the books came from, because I'm always fascinated, and it sounds like you were already up and running, fairly successful as brand-driven digital on the agency side, and then building your thought leadership kind of came in and an intermediate step, and that took you to the next level. Is that correct?
Yeah. And really, it kind of came from, I kind of mentioned all of my different hats that I wear, the different things that I do. So I'm working in digital marketing, helping clients. I am speaking at conferences about social media, digital marketing. So I have some big idea stuff. But what was really kind of building what I would say is a book's worth of content came in the first time I was asked to teach a 16-week course at the University of Iowa. So a lot of times, we have an hour-long keynote, we have a half day, a full day workshop, but being asked back that regularly for content really kind of gives you that focus of, okay, what is the larger structure? Maybe there's something that was much smaller that you've built out many different subsets in, or something that was just a starting off point that you get to in a speech that now you are able to build out the other pieces to that. So different things expanded and contracted. And really what I would say is my approach to digital marketing strategy ended up being my first book, which is Get Scrappy, because I found what was a common denominator, whether I was working with a small startup, an entrepreneur, a small business, or a great big large company, was that nobody had all of the marketing budget that they were looking for. I tell a story in the book. I was working with the folks at Schwinn, the bicycle company, and here you have a storied American brand, and you could think that, because I ride a Schwinn, my kids ride Schwinns, my parents may have ridden Schwinns, that they've got this enormous marketing team. And it's really a very small group at their headquarters in Madison, Wisconsin. And as I was talking to their digital marketing director, she was nodding along with a lot of this. And she said, that's so true, because we could all use a few people and a few dollars more. And I think a lot of times we look for, okay, I'm very different. I'm a B2B marketer. I'm an education marketer. And not to say that those don't have some different intricacies to them, but there's really a lot that unites us. And that's what I try to lay out in that Scrappy approach to digital marketing.
And I don't know if you've gotten this feedback lately, but if you look at both books about Brand Now and Get Scrappy, did you have a crystal ball? Did you know that we would all need to brand now, and whatever now means today? Of course, we're recording this in the middle of this sort of coronavirus craziness right now. And again, global tragedy, financial, personal, health, business. There's no area that's not impacted by this. But brand now has that sense of immediacy, right? Like, holy smokes, what do we do now? And then Get Scrappy is about get resourceful, do more with less, pull the nose up on the plane, and sail through adversity, regardless of how many resources you have or how many resources you've lost. Are you reframing some of that thought leadership into the current environment? And is that getting sort of new currency with the crisis that we're all going through?
I think that that's the kind of clarity we need. And I have to mention that this is part of the great podcast exchange, because you were on my show on Brand and you made these points about how necessary clarity is. And that's really what I think is a big part of my message with both Get Scrappy and Brand Now, is that you have to know who you are, what you stand for, and what you're about. That's really what Brand Now is. And you have to know that now more than ever. And you have to know that to be your brand and to bring your brand to life, but also in order to fuel your marketing and to get scrappy with it. I position them sometimes, and I do workshops sometimes where I put the two ideas together. And I always start off with Brand Now and then go into the Get Scrappy, because I think it's important to know who you are as before you're approaching what it is that you're doing and how you're doing it with your marketing. And it's funny, with the two books, they came out within a couple of years of one another. And it's really because the first chapter in Get Scrappy is about branding. And I wrote that first draft of the book. And when you put the whole thing together and step back and look at it, I realized I had an enormous first chapter that was that classic lesson of one of these things is not like the other. And so I set it all aside and rewrote a scrappy branding first chapter that couldn't cover everything. But that is when I first realized I think there's something else there. I think that's its own big idea that you can't put into a lumpy first chapter of a book.
Yeah, wow, what a great story. So you inadvertently wrote two books at once, set aside this gigantic chapter and said, okay, I'm going to come back to that. Did
Yes.
you get Scrappy chapter 1 as just the entree, knowing that you couldn't cover it all? And then this other book sort of wrote itself because it was sitting on the side burner calling your name.
A little bit, yes.
Hey, this interview is a real moneymaker. If you're serious about ramping up your reach and revenue as a speaker, trainer, or expert, book a confidential speaker strategy call with our team. The link is doitmarketing.com/call. It will be the most valuable 45 minutes you invest in your speaking-driven business. Speaking of value, let's get back to the show. Let me do a little quick diversion, little left turn, because I spent some time on the Brand Driven Digital website, and everyone should spend time on the Brand Driven Digital website. It is a very, very simple website. And obviously, that is by design, but I want to ask you a design question and a marketing question. All these agencies, they have these complex, like singing and dancing and penguins and things blowing up and, things sliding in and these gigantic hero images and all kinds of amazing things. And then it's almost like a Scrappy website. I mean, beautifully done, very professional, very sleek, but very, very simple. What was the design or marketing or business decision that had you decide our digital agency is going to have a very beautifully put together yet very simple website?
Well, it's two things. One is I have to say it's out of necessity. We're a small, scrappy team. So we don't, the great big crazy things that would need to keep updated and at a different pace as well isn't something that fits our size of business. That said, I think philosophically, we also work to eat our own dog food. And what we would say is focus on who you are, what you stand for. And that has to be simple and clear. You talked about the book titles and what they mean. And really, the biggest thing is I came up as an advertising copywriter or a marketing copywriter. So the word side of things, we've talked a lot about the visual impact, but really my background is on the words. So I try to be and try to teach to others being clear and concise. And it's a little thing, but book titles being relatively brief. And you have 3-word titles. I have 2-word titles, and there's so many, and it's hard to do. But also, I think the other thing with that is being active with those titles. And yours are like this as well. They're literally saying, do it. And with Get Scrappy, I want to, being verb driven about wanting your audience to do something. And I'm a firm believer in those little building blocks of engagement that can yield big results.
Yeah, for sure. Let me also ask you, because you've got some fairly large companies and organizations as clients, when you give them the message of shifting their brand, shifting their story, re-articulating why they're awesome and relevant to their target market, or even when you're telling them a little bit about the Get Scrappy philosophy of being able to, do a lot more impact with a lot fewer resources than they might have been used to. How coachable are they? How receptive are they? I mean, we're talking about, aerospace companies, big banks, big research companies, large organizations that can sometimes be a little bit monolithic or, hey, we want to do it just like the competition's doing it. And that's how they come to you. It's like, hey, Nick, could you make us look just like the competition except better? Right? That's the typical bank thing, right? Banks are not known for their massively creative ad campaigns and marketing schemes. How do you get them to play ball and open up with you and really do what's best for their own purposes and for their own objectives?
Well, the first piece of that, I think why simple is hard is the curse of knowledge. We know so much, whether we're individuals packaging our own business or great big companies. And we want to share that with everyone. And we think that we have to surround ourselves with all of these great big words and ideas and sights and visuals and things that just end up weighing us down. And as an outside advisor and consultant, it can be scary. You have that moment before the meeting where you're advising them to do something like this, where you take a deep breath and think, I've had many periods in the car on the way there where I've thought, oh, I've got nothing. This is going to sound like I'm telling them not to do anything at all. But it's really only doing what is most important and boiling it down and clarity of message. And I think in this crowded, distracted world we find ourselves in, that is what is necessary for today's audience. If you come to everyone with everything all the time, they're going to be overwhelmed. And we think that they're going to find what they're looking for. They're actually not even going to stop.
Yeah, wow, that's a profound statement right there. It's like, no, let's put everything on there because, they're smart. They'll just figure it out. They'll click through 3 layers of menus and they won't. They'll be gone.
Yeah.
Let me ask you about your team, because is it Megan on your team that's listed as a partner?
That is correct.
Is she also your partner in life?
She is. Go ahead and crowdsource if anyone has a great way to introduce that isn't, we always feel like, because then we've not mentioned it soon enough. And we've been a few meetings down the road where we're both there consulting and we realize, oh, they don't know that we're married.
Right.
Because we have different last names, which I totally understand being 11 letters of the alphabet, some of them twice in my last name. If your brand name is Foster, I can understand not taking on Westergaard. But yes, we are in this together, which means that we're all working from home right now. I believe we're both in meetings at this very moment. And somewhere there's also 5 kids in the house that are...
Ooh, exciting. Well, I was going to ask you, see, there was no wrong answer and there was no right answer to that question. Because if she was just your business partner, my next question would have been, what in the world made you go into business with a partner? Now, that question is no longer relevant. The answer you gave me is, Nick, what is it like to be working with your spouse? Do you turn off the switch? Do you have some sort of preset agreement that, honey, as of 6 p.m., we're personal. As of 9 a.m., we're back to professional. What are the boundaries and guidelines, and what's the rule book for working with your spouse?
The rule book is that there isn't really probably a great rule book. And I think that one of my favorite jokes to make about both working with your spouse, working from home is so it's great. You're working from home, but you're also living in your office. And I think everyone listening in these times is probably identifying that because we're all living that, but it's with its own set of challenges. And I think what's worked for us is sometimes people do really well with, yes, those extreme lines drawn around things. And after 5 p.m., we're this. And if we're on vacation, we're totally unplugged for 10 days. And we don't do that. We both have irons in the fire that we need to check on. We try to have those off times, but we also recognize that this great, big, crazy, flexible life also gives us that flexibility that we're able to take some great big trips as a family. And in reading your books, I know that you've been able to do some of those same things as well. And I love that. And it's not for everybody. Some people need those very clear lines. But for us, it works very well to have a little bit of, I think there's that myth of work-life balance of trying to, because at any moment in time, you're going to catch those scales wonky. It looks more like a heart, an EKG meter there, that it's going up and down constantly. And hopefully over time, the trend line looks right.
Exactly right. It's more like a work-life heart attack then.
Yeah, I hope not. Maybe the metaphor doesn't work as well as I thought.
Right. Let me ask you about your podcast adventure, because you mentioned about the great podcast exchange of 2020, which is now in the history books. It's written about and talked about for years after we've done this. What was your adventure initially in podcasting? What was the purpose of it initially? And then how has it grown and evolved after you've done so many of these great episodes?
Well, it's interesting because I actually have, which is perfect for the audio radio-esque world, I have a segue that comes from work-life balance. So about 2012, I guess, when podcasting was in the state of resurgence. And anyone that works in digital media knows when there's a new thing on the horizon, we need to kind of embrace it and play with it and understand how it works if we're going to be able to talk intelligently with our clients about it. So I did that with podcasting, and I thought, wow, there's so many great shows about marketing. I don't know what exactly I have to contribute at the time. And I have had a co-host. We were talking, we were both marketing people. And we thought, because we both work from home, why don't we talk to all of these great marketers that we know and authors that we know? But instead of talking to them about marketing, we will talk to them about how they do what they do. So for 2 years, 100 episodes, I had a weekly podcast that was called The Work Talk Show, and talked with folks like Seth Godin, Daniel Pink, but not about what they usually talk and write about, but how they do their work. So in a weird way, this became a master class for everything that we were just talking about how you do what you do, how you write books. The 2 books that I wrote, I used things that I learned from Daniel Pink, Dan Rome, that are a big part of my book writing and major writing project strategy there. But after 2 years, I realized, as any smart marketer does, I had something that was taking up time that wasn't a part of my mix in a logical way. And those things, when they're on your radar, become frustrating. You realize this is not generating leads. It was in a general way, generating awareness, but time is precious. And my co-host was in the same place, was undergoing a career transition. And I also realized it was after Get Scrappy was out and Brand Now was on deck that I wanted to double down on the world of brands, and I wanted to talk to more brands. So I started a branding focused show that is where I've been 240 some episodes later.
Super quick commercial break. Isn't this interview amazing? If you'd like to get more ideas on how to start or grow your speaking business fast, pop over to our free training at doitmarketing.com/webinar. Talk a little bit about, because you are in several ways a personal brand and a company brand, and you've got the brand-driven digital website that has a podcast, but no blog. The blog is over on nickwestergaard.com. What was the decision about separating the media, if you will, that let's put the blog over here, let's put the podcast over there, and just give us the thought process, because obviously you're doing both of those things, which is a lot of work, and God bless you for keeping up with all of it. What was the decision about what goes on the company site versus what goes on your personal brand website?
Oh, yeah. And I have to acknowledge just the reality of, I have a website developer friend who can attest to this if called to the stand, that I've probably had it about every different way that you could. Initially, I started a blog years ago when I was an internal marketer at a company that was Nick Westergaard's ideas on branding and digital marketing. And then hung this shingle out and had a very traditional agency website, everything that you mentioned before, back in the days of flash sites with moving things. And so you couldn't have like a WordPress blog there because we had to do all the jazzy, flashy, uppercase F flash things. And so they didn't go together then. And then I brought my blog into a next gen consulting website. So there was some thought leadership there. Then, as I just mentioned, I had this other podcast that was unrelated to my business. That was another site over here. And then my speaking started taking off, and I didn't want a speaking site without thought leadership. So then I moved the blog content that used to be, for a while, I had a community where I was writing most of the blogs, but other people were. And then that really became, as I wrote books, as far as our written thought leadership went, that was kind of grouped there. So I took that written thought leadership, put it with the books, put it with the content that was me, and that was about promoting Nick as a speaker, as an author. So that all lives there. And then as the new podcast emerged that was related to what I write about, what I speak about, but also what we consult about, we put that on the Brand Driven site. So onbrandpodcast.com, which I'll mention later, redirects to branddrivendigital.com/podcast and all of that good stuff. But like working with your spouse, like working from home, I'm not sure there's a black and white logical way of doing this. And I think that I've done them all, but that's the thought process behind it.
Let me also give you huge kudos, going back to the Nick Westergaard website for a moment. It seems that you have completely, not revamped, but reframed your speaking page. So right up at the top, which is really, really smart, right? Big bold letters, all programs available virtually. And you have a great paragraph there about your street cred and all of your chops to be doing virtual and remote programs in a highly engaging, highly interactive sort of way. Even the topics you have reframed in a brilliant way around, using phrases like in turbulent times, stand out virtual communication, since we're all virtual right now, brand now, how to stand out in our crowded, distracted world, which again takes on new meaning these days. It was always crowded and distracted, but now it's really distracted and upset and emotionally volatile. What was the thought process, or how quickly did you realize that, oh my gosh, this isn't going to be a 1 or 2 weeks thing. This is going to be a thing for the next period of time. And then what do you think coming out of this, which we will, how will the world of speaking be transformed now that you and many, many other speakers are getting accustomed to, and more importantly, buyers, the meeting planners and conference producers are getting accustomed to this virtual delivery mode? Are we looking at some hybrid future? Or I know I asked 17 questions all at once in that. Let's talk about the revamping of the topics and the reframing really of the topics. And then let's talk about where you see this going once things start to come back to the new normal and what the implications are for online and offline hybrid meetings, et cetera.
Well, first, I'm glad you noticed that, and I'm glad it seemed timely to you because, I think like many, I had that first kind of shell-shocked week where I'm sure I didn't change anything and just didn't exactly know what was happening. And, that was really the point where most of us speakers were reaching out to our clients, to our events, seeing what was happening, see what was canceled, what's postponed, what's moving virtual. So a lot of that time was there. And the first wave, it's interesting how in asking that, because I went into individual talks because our friends at eSpeakers had mentioned the importance of adding some of that to the eSpeakers entry to the listing there. They'd sent out a good email, I think that within that first week. And so around then, I went into my individual talks on my website as well and added that available virtually. And then that sat for a few days. And then I thought, geez, that's within the individual topic level. The site has a front door and, the topics it doesn't take long to get to them. But I wanted to make sure, like you mentioned, that when someone first arrives, first sees that they're at least seeing something about the impact that I'm going to have on your audience, which really hasn't changed. So some of those top level benefits are still the same of your audience is going to know how to do this. But you have to at least, I think, mention the now. You said that on my podcast. You talked about the context and what you're going to look like if you're not at least acknowledging the context of right now. So that's why I think even the facelifts that you can give some of those introductory paragraphs is key. So that's on the website side. Question 2A on the meetings and what's happening now and what we'll learn from this when we come out of this. I was just talking about this with my wife this morning, and I really think, and I'm an optimist, I'm a Pollyanna. I think that a lot of times if you're in the speaking and motivating others, you have to be. But I think we're going to come out of this hungry for human connection, hungry to be in the same room with others. I mean, I think that that's why the events that we speak at, the associations that we don't think about, that's why being together at NSA with our fellow speakers is great because we don't get to see people that do what we do. And we're all speaking remotely at other people's other associations events, but it's great to be in those rooms together for those days. And I think other people, there are associations of dentists, of the window and door manufacturers, of the roller skating association, which I've spoken at, are going to be hungry to be together again, especially after this. Now, what I will say, you talk about how much we've done virtually, and a lot of us already had as part of our packages. If we've got, the different things that we talk about at pricing packages level that folks like Lori with Sweet Spot pricing are talking about the different levels. A lot of us had these virtual components, and I'm not always sure because I know I've had clients that's been an afterthought that, I get that too. Great. I guess we'll do something. It might be hard for us to set up and we won't even do that. But now I think we'll have seen the value that provides. And I think we'll have some of those hybrid events, like you said, but I also think that it's going to give new meaning to those things that we've provided as supporting benefits that people are going to understand and value a lot more.
Yeah, exactly. Wow, that's very exciting. I think you're right about the hunger for sure. I mean, I'm hungry just to be within 6 feet of another human being at some point. It's going to be great.
Like I told you, I was just hungry to wear a shirt that had a pattern on it because it felt exciting today.
Yes. We have small pleasures, my friend, small pleasures. I've got 2 closing questions as we bring our fantastic conversation to a wrap up. The final question is going to be, how do people get connected and stay connected to more Nick Westergaard brilliance? But even before we get there, second to last question is, if folks were to take one central idea from our conversation today about getting scrappy, about branding, about relevance, about digital and social media, take your pick, what would you hope that one parting gift concept might be?
I really think I'm going to echo kind of what we've been talking about here and what we talked about on my show, which is the importance of clarity, who you are, what you stand for, what you mean to the people that you serve. I think that's important. It's always been important, but I think now more than ever, it's not about adding all of this extra stuff, checking all of these extra boxes. It's important to understand that, to stop if you need to and assess what you've been doing and what's most important, and find that idea and articulate it in a clear, concise, meaningful way.
Tremendous. Now, people are going to want more. They're going to want to connect with you. They're going to want to buy the book. They want to come to the website. We're going to link up all of these things that Nick is going to share right in the show notes under this episode at thespeakingshow.com. So, Nick, how do people get connected and stay connected to your brilliance? Where can we send them?
Well, you've mentioned both nickwestergaard.com for me, the speaker, the author, and branddrivendigital.com for the branding, digital marketing consulting. Both books are available on Amazon, but I'd point you as an intermediate step to getscrappybook.com and brandnowbook.com, because there you'll find some freebies, digital extras, supporting interviews that went into the book. So lots of extras there, and a jumping off point for buying it from Amazon, Barnes & Noble, IndieBound to support local booksellers, whatever you desire from there.
And Amazon's busy shipping who knows what, so forget about books for now and support your independent booksellers, my friends. I love that. I love that. We actually just placed an order with our independent bookstore that's closed except open for orders.
Yeah.
And God love the independent bookstores. Fantastic. Well, Nick Westergaard, you are a gentleman and a scholar. I appreciate you. We have to have you back on the show.
Thank you, sir. Happy to do so.
Well, that wraps up another episode of The Speaking Show. Hey, tell you what, if you like us, rate us and review us on iTunes. Subscribe. Tell a friend. Go grab the notes and downloads and extras at thespeakingshow.com. See you next time.